ask me questions.
Yeah.
She's able to. So, hope everybody's having a great day. And there she is. Let's see if she'll send me a request. Yep. All right. Let's see if it works.
Do we have sound? I can hear you.
Cross your fingers. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yes. Oh, we are victorious.
All right. I don't know what's up with Instagram. But, okay.
Who cares, right? We're on here now. I am so excited to meet you because somehow I missed you at KetoCon. Now, I have watched your talk on the replay. Amazing, amazing. So let's kind of start there. Now, I named the live Customize Your Keto, but I want you to start by telling us a little bit about what biohacking means, because it sounds like really super exciting and sciencey.
Sure. Do you want to just introduce yourself to
for sure.
Listen to your other videos?
Yes, I'm Colorful Keto with Dory, and it's so awesome to meet your people.
Awesome. Everybody go over and follow Dory and look at some of her videos because they're pretty awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so biohacking, is a term that's kind of coming back into vogue. It's becoming popular by some of the people out there kind of pushing the envelope. But it really means, how do you actually incorporate your life, all the stresses in your life, and try to do things to help kind of mitigate those things. So the stress of life, the stress of having a job, having, family, having all these responsibilities, and how do you actually live this way but still maintain your health? Because, we start off with nutrition. Nutrition is extremely important. It's kind of the basis of everything, but you have to go beyond that. And so a lot of people will kind of stall out, not really reach their kind of goals. And a lot of that has to do with, they're extremely stressed out from other issues.
Okay, so what I want to say is, for me, biohacking was one of those cool words like intermittent fasting. They're not beginner's moves, so you don't hear them in the beginning. And the first time I heard intermittent fasting, I went, oh, I need to research that. Everyone's doing it. Everyone's getting such great results. And when I researched, I went, oh, okay, I already do that. I do that already. So I kind of want to talk a little bit more about how biohacking is really kind of like that, because it's the small tweaks that we're making that some of us are already doing. You might be a biohacker already and not know it.
Yeah, I think most people are. There's a spectrum of biohacking. So on the one end, there's, hyperbaric oxygen. There's, cryo chambers. There's a lot of expensive tools that you can use. And for some people who are really have a reason for it, like let's say you've had a traumatic brain injury or, you've had some serious metabolic issues, then I think it's a good idea to maybe use some of those tools. Okay. On the other hand, most of us can get away with a lot of simple things, simple biohacks by just, taking advantage of our environment. So as you mentioned, intermittent fasting is one of my favorite biohacks because, it's free. It actually saves you money and the benefits are amazing. Things like sleep. So I've probably drone on a lot about sleep, but sleep is extremely important. Getting adequate sleep, getting deep sleep, all those things kind of play into your ability to regulate your hormones, because we used to think that obesity was due to calories in equals calories out, and now we realize that a lot of it is actually more hormonally driven, but there's more than just food that drives those hormones. And so you have to really address things like sleep, sun exposure, stress reduction, exercise. So it's really like a term that encompasses all the things that most of us probably already know about, but there are some newer things that are coming to kind of the forefront because of the research that's happening and the technology that we have to actually measure the impact of some of these biohacks. So that's why I think it's really kind of becoming a mainstream thing.
So can you share a couple of those things with us? Like what's a little less mainstream that's up and coming? What's the buzz in the biohack world that we haven't maybe heard of yet?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kind of research looking at the metabolism, the impact of a lot of our stressors on mitochondrial health. And so most of the things that you'll hear coming forward are going to be focused on how do you actually improve your mitochondria? How do you regulate your hormones? So, on one extreme, there's people who are recommending or trying microdosing LSD. which I think is on the extreme end. But then other things like NAD infusions, NAD kind of replenishment or supplementation is one that I think is going to come forward pretty soon. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I think, is something that's going to become a little bit more mainstream because there's so much research coming out on the benefits of it for multiple things. So those are probably some of the major ones. I think that technology-wise, the Oura Ring has really allowed us to look at the impact of sleep and stress on things that I think we weren't really able to recognize before. And I'm a big proponent of something called HRV measurement. And there's a new sensor coming out that I think will be a game changer. It's by Jason Moore of Elite HRV, and it's called CoreSense. And it's like a pulse ox. You can check your HRV. And I think if more people start learning about that, they can really tap into their stress levels, how to regulate it. And so I think that's probably something that you'll see on the forefront pretty soon. Okay,
so for people who don't know, HRV, what's that an acronym for?
Yeah, so heart rate variability. So the way you can probably think about it is each time your heart beats, it doesn't beat the same distance. So, when we measure our heartbeat, we say, okay, it's 60 beats per minute. Well, the reality is that within each beat, there's some variation, and this, in milliseconds. And that variation is controlled by your autonomic system or your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And so normally you want to have kind of a balance between those two, but the problem is that we are chronically stressed because of our life, the way that we have to live. And so we're pretty much always sympathetic dominant, meaning that we're always kind of chronically stressed. And so when you hear terms thrown out like chronic inflammation and chronic stress, you're really talking about the autonomic system.
Okay.
And so a lot of things that we do in biohacking really try to focus on the opposite, the parasympathetic aspect of it, because you kind of want to get back into that balance. So like when we talk about omega-3 versus omega-6, we're not saying that one is necessarily better than the other. We're talking about the ratio between the two because you need both.
Okay.
Same thing with HRV. You want to have a balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic. And so what's really cool is that before you could do all these things and assume that it's giving you some benefit because maybe you feel good, your mood is better. But now we can actually quantify it. And so we can really look at things and say, okay, when I do, ice fast for a week, this is what happens to my HRV. And obviously there's multiple variables that really affect it, but you can look at trends. And so I think that's why biohacking is going to be, I think, the next big thing, because we can measure the impact of what we're doing.
So when you say that, I see eyes glowing of sciencey people, like people who love the numbers, who love tracking stuff. Like I just see little lights go off in the back of their eyes, like back here. Because to me, when I hear that, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a lot of numbers and research that I don't understand. And that is why we are so grateful for you, Dr. John Limansky, who can explain these kinds of things to us regular people. Because for me, I hear it and then I go, oh, science numbers I don't understand. So I love having someone who can break it down for us. So on that note, I want to say, what would be one of the things that you could maybe do at home to experiment or to start biohacking? Or how do I know if I need to look into biohacking? Maybe that's a better question.
Yeah, I think everybody needs to look into biohacking. So that's the
good answer.
And obviously how much you put into it really depends on what your goals are. So I always look at things more in terms of a spectrum. On one end, you have people who are extremely ill, metabolically sick, not necessarily just morbidly obese, but if you look at their lab values, and you can tell that they're very, very sick. And so for those people, I think doing everything possible to really reverse that as soon as possible is really important. Then on the other hand, you have people who are maybe, are not that metabolic sick, don't feel that great. And so for those people, you might want to just kind of step into each biohack and do it, based on what works for your kind of day-to-day life. Me on one extreme, I do basically all the biohacks all the time because, number one, it works very well for me. Number two, telling people that they should be doing these things. And so it would be kind of hypocritical if I was just saying, yeah, the research shows, this is what happens. So I'd like to actually experience it myself and say, look, this is what the data shows when I do it. And so maybe you should consider doing something like that, especially for people who have stalled out, maybe have hit a plateau, maybe haven't got all the way where they wanted to just with the ketogenic or low carb, high fat diet. So simple things that you can do. And I always tell people after, food, the next most important thing in my opinion is sleep. So, it's hard to get good sleep, and not just quantity of sleep, but the type of sleep you get. And so, if you go into a sleep study lab and you actually measure people's brain waves, we can break it down into different levels of brain waves in terms of how deep they get. A lot of us will get, maybe longer periods of sleep because we take a sleeping pill or something. But the reality is that you don't actually get into the deep sleep and the REM sleep that you want, that you need to actually heal. And so if you can actually measure it, and there are some good tools out there, I think still the best is the Oura Ring, then you can see okay, when I do this biohack, this is what impacts my sleep. And so then that's a very good positive reinforcement to say, look, if I'm up at night, I'm on my computer, the lights are on, I'm drinking, espresso at 5 o'clock, I'm eating dinner at 10 o'clock, my sleep is horrible. Well, then maybe you should address that, because what happens is we're kind of in this vicious cycle where we don't sleep well because we're stressed. So the next day we don't feel well, and our cortisol is through the roof. So we're hungrier. So we eat, poorly, and we're stressed out. And so you get in kind of this vicious cycle, and you kind of have to break that, right? And so that's kind of the benefit of using data, is you can actually reflect on the changes that you're making, how that actually is impacting your body beyond just the weight, because, we fixated on weight, but weight is not in itself a good marker, I think, of success.
Agreed. Kathy Ashton would like to know, what can we do for thyroid issues?
Yeah, thyroid definitely is one of those ones that I think a lot of people have issues with. And obviously, I need to have a little bit more specific data. Hyper versus hypothyroidism. There's a lot of things that, in terms of lab measurements, I would start off with, TSH, T4, T3, reverse T4, and reverse T3, because you could have theoretically normal levels and still be, affected by your thyroid. Okay. In general, I would say a good start is to get the labs, get a doctor who, works well with you and understands endocrinology a little bit better than just, hey, these are the numbers, let's put you on the medication. In terms of dietary changes, the first thing I would say is really get rid of all the junk food. So, there's a big debate in kind of the social media world, is paleo better than low carb, than keto, than carnivore, than, whatever latest and greatest fad diet. What I would say is that if you get rid of all the junk food first, all the processed packaged food, then you can kind of narrow down in terms of what works for you. The second thing I would say is get rid of soy-based products.
Yes.
And that's a big one that will affect your thyroid. And then get rid of plastics. So there's a lot of phytoestrogens out there, in everything basically. So in your water, in plastics obviously, but even some of the chemicals that you use around the house, you're basically kind of inundated with phytoestrogens, and so they'll mimic certain things and they'll affect your thyroid as well.
Well, and I want to say those things matter when they matter, because we don't stress out about everything all at once, and we replace things all at one time. When I first started doing videos with Dr. Ken Berry, every time he put a video out, I was like, dang it, Dr. Ken, that's something else I can't do. Man, now I can't have plastic. Dude, but I've slowly started replacing.
Very depressing to be married to. Just ask my wife.
Are you like, dude?
She's like, well, can we do this? Well, you can, but this is what's going to happen to you. So we basically have to live in a bubble that's not made out of plastic.
Right? Dude, have they produced not plastic bubbles yet? Because you know what? All the bubbles I've seen are plastic.
We can work on that maybe. I don't know. There you go. You need to create a society that lives in a stainless steel bubble.
Gelatin something. I don't know.
Yeah,
so fantastic. So when you say that you take on one biohack at a time, does that mean you kind of pick one thing and vary it? So for example, would you do something like, say, do you know what, I'm going to do dairy free for a month and see how it affects me. Is that what we're talking about? Something like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the time frame in terms of how long you have to do it for, we don't have a good answer in terms of 30 days, but I think, 2 weeks to 4 weeks of doing a trial of something. So for a lot of people, as you mentioned, dairy. So
yes,
when people are getting new to keto, a lot of people will use dairy as their basis for the fat because, it tastes good and it's an easy one to use. But, a couple things that impact whether or not dairy can be good for you is, number one, where's the source? If it's U.S. based, it's going to be pasteurized. It's going to be from cows that are a certain lineage that have a lot of casein, so you can get an inflammatory response. You can get an insulin response. And so if you feel like, okay, I'm kind of stalled out, I'm really hitting my macros, I'm watching the caloric intake, but I'm still not successful, maybe my joints hurt a little bit, maybe I'm having some kind of mucus in my nose, then I think doing a 30-day or 3-week trial without dairy is a really good way to test and see, okay, number one, subjectively, how do you feel? Because, data matters, but if you have the perfect data and you feel horrible, then who cares about the data, right? So I think number one, starting off with subjectively, like how do you feel? And then objectively, what are the values showing? So, what's your HRV showing? What's your sleep looking like? What is your heart rate doing? Things like that. And then you can kind of really start narrowing down what works specifically for you based on your genetics, based on your history, what you've done to your body in the past. And then kind of really, that's the benefit of biohacking, is you make it individualized for you, because people will notice that sometimes they'll stall or it's not working the way they think it will, or it's working for their neighbor, and they get frustrated and they want to stop. But the reality is, if you just kind of tweak it, you can probably be very successful.
Can we talk about that for a minute? Because I just received a call from a girlfriend of mine the other night, and she said this to me: Dory, I tried keto. I did it for like 6 weeks. I was doing all the stuff. I was doing everything perfect. I even was intermittent fasting, and it didn't work, so I gave up. And I kind of giggled, and I said, okay, so when you start telling me all the things you did right, very first off, you're telling me you started fasting before you were fat adapted, not a beginner's move. So she already was like, I'm doing all the things. So how do we tackle that? Because I come across that a lot, and I think you must too. There's a base of knowledge we need to have before we start intermittent fasting and before we start biohacking. So what do you recommend people have for a base before they kind of go next level keto? Like, what do you have to have under your belt first?
Yeah, I think number one, first off, get rid of all the processed food. That's number one. So for most people who I think are transitioning, that's, it's a big step from Western diet to going full on hardcore ketogenic. So a lot of times I'll tell people, look, just start off getting rid of the fast food, junk food, just start eating real whole foods, and then do that for about 2 weeks, and then transition over to like a ketogenic way of eating. So test your glucose, check your ketones, get a meal plan that is really kind of outlined for you, and there's some really pretty good ones out there.
Yes.
And so pick one. There's really good resources that have it already planned out for you.
Okay.
Do that for a month or so, just so that you have you don't have to think about what you're actually going to be doing, and just get into the ketosis. Start to learn how it feels to actually feel good again, because I think for a lot of people, they don't really remember what it feels like to feel good. And when you go hardcore ketogenic, your brain is getting good energy, your hormones are suppressed, and so you feel much better. And then once you've kind of got it down where you understand what it feels like, you remember what the signals are when you're hungry, because for a lot of people too, they forgot what it feels like to really feel hungry, because they feel hungry all the time. And so when you go hardcore ketosis, your appetite is suppressed pretty well. But when you're hungry, you remember what those signals are like, and you actually eat good food. And then once you've kind of dialed it in where you have an idea of what it feels like to be in ketosis, how your body responds to certain things, then I think that's when you really start kind of fine-tuning things. So, a lot of times it's an elimination thing where you start looking at, okay, well, maybe dairy doesn't do very well with me. Get rid of that. Maybe carbohydrates that I'm consuming are not the kinds that I should be Maybe the source of the food that I'm eating is not the best, and I need to focus on that. Then, start incorporating things like intermittent fasting, maybe a little bit longer term fasting, and then really start kind of driving home the other points like we've already mentioned: the sleep, the exercise, the stress reduction, and trying to figure out, long term and within the calendar of your life, how are you going to do all these things and still be able to live, right? And so a lot of times that, I think, is one of the bigger challenges is figuring out a customized program based on your life and your day-to-day kind of living.
Awesome. So for me, it kind of sounds like the science version of holistic health. You're incorporating a little bit of everything in your health, but it's the more let's get the quantifiable science side of it. And I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big data person, partially just because I'm a data nerd, but it also helps direct me a lot in terms of what I do. But for a lot of people, you probably don't need the detailed data that I use, but simple things like glucose check, heart rate check, ketone check can really kind of focus your attention on what you're doing and how it's impacting you metabolically. And so I think a lot of people will notice that in the mornings maybe their ketone levels are a little bit lower than they would expect. And a lot of times that has to do with, did you eat late at night the night before? How was your sleep pattern? Because if your sleep pattern was bad, your cortisol is going to be through the roof. You're going to suppress basically ketone production. Your glucose is going to be much higher. You're going to be driving insulin. And so you're going to be back in that kind of vicious cycle where you're trying to do the right thing, but hormonally your brain is sending out signals saying, I want to eat. So you're making it much harder on yourself in the long run that way.
So how do we know if we're getting enough sleep? Because I'm going to tell you a secret. Since I keto, I don't sleep as much, but I feel like it's better sleep. Like I sleep for 6 or 7 hours instead of, 8 or 10 hours, but I feel like it's a better rested sleep. So how do we know if we're getting enough quality sleep? Oh no, we have no sound. Oh, there you're back.
Yeah, great question. Obviously, spectrum, ring, which is, and that'll track it exactly for you.
Okay.
But let's say you don't do, number one, when you wake up, how do you feel? Do you have a headache? Do you feel groggy? Are you sharp? Number two, you can check your heart rate. And so you can track it over time and say, okay, well, my heart rate, let's say it averages 60 in the morning when I wake up. Well, today it averaged about 75. Well, chances are that you probably didn't get good quality sleep.
Okay.
Another thing that you could do is do the HRV measurement. So
okay.
HRV measurement in the morning gives you a baseline of kind of overall where you are in terms of your stress levels. But if it's and the way you look at HRV, just kind of blanket general, is if it's the high number, that's
okay.
the stress level. If it's very low number, then you're more sympathetic tone, and so you probably are not sleeping as well. And so if you measure, and obviously like one measurement is hard to make any inference from that, but let's say like you track it over time and you notice kind of a correlation where when you wake up one morning you don't feel good, your heart rate's a little bit higher, your HRV is lower. Well, that's a pretty good indication that you didn't sleep very well and you didn't get those deep sleep, kind of REM sleep that we want. That I find to be pretty good kind of bootstrap way of measuring, whether or not you're sleeping pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know for me, my only concern is everyone says if you don't get 8 hours, you're not getting enough sleep. If you don't get 8 hours, you're not getting enough sleep. But for me, I go to bed, I wake up, I feel refreshed, no headaches. I feel, my brain turns on with keto energy and it's 6 hours and I can't sleep past there anymore. But then I thought, should I be concerned? Everybody says I'm lacking 2 hours. And I'm like, you don't even know what I do in that 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, studies I kind of look at it's about, it said that actually if you really want to focus on, if you are deep in REM sleep, then yeah, that is kind of that has, which is a little bit different based on your genetics.
Okay.
And so if you are kind of doing your sleep pattern, what you do,
yeah.
And so like, let's say for instance, most people should be going to bed around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, waking up when the sun rises, so 5, 6, depending on where you live. So if the sound is going out.
It's so weird right now. I do not know what's going on.
I hear you now, but we'll power through and see what we can.
Yeah, you're frozen, but I can hear you. So I say go with it, and
I hope it's a good look.
It's not the worst. Do you know what? I have been frozen in worse positions. It's really not that bad.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, so let's maybe kind of wrap up, because I know it's really, really glitchy, and I want to ask you two things. Number one, what are your favorite biohacks, and what do you have going on that we have to stalk you for this week?
So favorite biohacks, there's so many that I like to do. My favorite really is sauna and cold therapy.
Ooh.
I really enjoy those. So cold thermogenesis and infrared sauna, for me, I think are some of the most beneficial things. Let's start off with the sauna. So sauna-wise, I'm a pretty busy person, and so my only chance of really kind of having time to myself is in the sauna.
Yes.
So it allows me to basically just shut everything off, get in there, do some stretching, and get the benefit of relaxation, but also all the benefits from infrared. And then the cold thermogenesis I usually do around before I'm going to go to bed to drop my core temperature. And I find that it really impacts me in terms of how well I sleep, but also muscle soreness, kind of joint aches, and then energy levels. And so I will, when I'm traveling, I'll try to stock the ice machines and take all the ice that's available and do ice baths in the bathtub.
I love it.
That's how much I wouldn't say enjoy. I don't think enjoy is a good word, but I realize the tremendous benefits for me, and so that's what keeps me kind of motivated. And then in terms of what to stock me for this week,
right? All your new best friends.
Yeah, I don't know. I think more Instagram. I'm trying to be a little bit more on Instagram Live and Facebook Live. I'm going to be 40, and so I'm kind of in that generation that, was a little bit too old for all the social media, and so it's definitely a work in progress to get out there and just talk to a camera. It's kind of weird for me.
Welcome to the club. I just turned 43 yesterday, and all the social media is weird for me. Like, we never did this back in the day. I didn't even use my Facebook before because it was weird when creepy internet people wanted to talk to you, and now I spend my days doing it all the time, and it's not even creepy.
Yeah, it's funny how that's worked. I mean, so that, and then I'll be doing a Facebook Live with Dr. Ken Berry, so we're going to do them weekly as well. And
what day of the week are you picking?
We are doing Wednesday.
Awesome! Yay! I do mine with him on Mondays. We're going to be getting together with him later tonight.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going to watch it. Hopefully the sound works better for you guys.
Yeah. We're going to cross our fingers.
Yeah, probably. But he's great, he's got so much information, so much passion, and so I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm doing, podcasts on Friday with Jimmy Moore.
Yay! He's our favorite too.
Diving into the biohacking, little by little. Just really focusing on trying to get the right message out there, and kind of like what you're doing, really focusing on simple things that people do thousands of dollars to get healthy, which is, I don't think you need to do that.
Well, and you know what? Think about what we used to spend on medication. You know, what we're saving on medication, we can spend that money on food. And I tell people all the time, take the money you used to spend on junk food and buy it real good food and see how much your life improves.
Yeah, average person, spends about $1,500 a month on medications. And what people don't realize is that a lot of those medications, there's ways that they manipulate the prices. So the prices are going to go up for most medications. And, there's quite a bit of side effects with a lot of them that are not really highlighted. And so,
Oh, and unceremoniously done, but that's okay. That is totally okay. That's good. We'll